You weirdo, going around touching people.
I love touching people.
Yeah, me too.
Hello everyone, if this is the first time you tune in, welcome. I am Jess. I am a creative director by day and a third culture daydreaming snob by night.
And I'm Taya. I like to talk about culture with you and her. And today, we're gonna talk about dating! So yeah, dating is third culture. What do we think?
Man, it's a roller coaster ride.
It's a roller coaster of emotions.
But I feel like it's a mix, in my case, to be fair, it's a mix of my own childhood trauma aftermath plus third culture identity.
So it's like so many layers there.
Yeah. But definitely the fact of being third culture affects a lot.
Do you think that being third culture changes how we date as third culture dating?
Changes, it's more like every time I meet someone, I thought that was what I want or what fits me. Then I realized, but because I have those aspects as part of my identity, that's not enough, or that actually doesn't work. But it's not till I meet someone and then have a conversation or spend some time with them would I realize that's not a right fit for me. And it's not in a general sense. It's more like speaking specifically towards my third cultural background.
I feel like that's kind of a progression of dating in general also, where you date people, you realize you don't like people who have red shoes, and then you dump them, and then you date someone with blue shoes, and you're like, I don't like blue shoes either. So you go with bare feet, and that seems to work fine.
So you have a thing for feet?
We won't discuss it here. In our next episode about feet, we'll deep dive into my fetish.
So what about you?
What
What about you and your third culture dating world? I feel like you'll have more story to share compared to me, because I am actually a very extremely introverted person when it comes to dating scenes.
And I'm a whore, so I just go around and... Well, I mean, I have used the apps, which I think make it easier as third culture, or, moving around to different cultures. And you can, assess people by what they look like, which is exactly what you should do when you're dating, is just go slowly on looks.
Yeah, that creates so much problem for me, man. And it's especially with our background. Dating app just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I really tried. Ever since Tinder was invented, I was still in San Francisco. So I really had that first dip.
Yeah.
And, but ever since then, and I give it a few more try in between.
Yeah.
I realized just by looking at my profile or my pictures, I tried really hard to be as descriptive as I could on my profile.
And then you see people with no description.
Yeah, they don't deserve my profile.
They don't, yeah.
But the thing is, 9 out of 10, every time when I meet someone or match with someone, they always have this very superficial assumption on who I am as a person. And then straight off the bat, I will provide something deeper, because I'm like, I'm gonna let you know I am much more.
You ask about their political viewpoints, what they think about abortion. Is that your intro?
Not that.
Oh.
Not the first date. We don't talk about that at first date.
Okay, got it.
But when I really present myself, they get turned off because that's not what they want. So I really try dating app, and never works for me.
Yeah, it's a tough one, especially if you are, looking for a specific types of personalities rather than, I think it's a numbers game though. But yeah, as like a third culture, I'm always looking for people who are also third culture. Like I had this criteria before that they must also be of Asian background, and
You have a list.
I have a list.
Okay.
Well, the thing is, I was thinking, because I've dated different races and from different cultures, and at the very end of the day, I was like, you know what? It would be nice if they had an Asian background so they understood, the foods I ate or like why, I do certain things a certain way. But they must also be, Western way of thinking so that they don't like put these weird societal pressures of being an Asian female.
Be a good wife.
Exactly. Be a good traditional wife. So I thought that's what I wanted, but then I met my current partner and that totally like changed everything. So I think when you meet like the right person, it's, and you don't always necessarily need to tick off all these like criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a good starting point because if you don't know what you're looking for, if you don't know what you want, then it's harder to find that person.
So in my case, weirdly enough, I'd never had like that one list. Every time
until these days, it's very trendy.
Yeah,
like,
but whenever people ask me what's your type, I'm like, I actually don't know. They would try to form a type for me based on my dating history and then what kind of personality I dated.
Yeah.
But that's also not necessarily my list. I never had a list, but I feel like moving around.
Yeah.
My internal preference changes based on like
right
where I am.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. But
so do you have different like lists or internal lists from when you're in the States versus Japan, for example, or Taiwan?
Yeah, I think in the States I would be more specific. One is it might be because when I was in New York, I would not be the only multicultural background person. So it's not that hard to find another third culture person or like people who are curious about other cultures or open to other cultures, as long as you don't find like someone who's like complete opposite in terms of spirituality point of view, political point of view. Like those are like hard pass.
Yeah.
You can find somewhere in between to be like, okay, that's not that hard. So because of that, I'm more specific into like, oh, maybe I don't want to date a certain race, or I want to avoid.
So racist.
I know, I am. No, preference. But it's like similar. It's coming from a similar point of view. It's like, because it might be too far away from my root culture, that could create a communicational problem.
But then if you don't have a root culture, then how do you find someone?
So after I moved to Japan, though, I kind of have to rebuild that list because now we become the majority in the society. Like everyone's Asian,
Yeah.
But what kind of Asians are you looking for? And or is it just Asian,
Take
or
the
you're
quiz.
open?
What kind of Asian are you?
Yeah, or there are also expats, right?
Yes.
But I'm again, I'm an introvert, and then when it comes to dating, I'm actually pretty private. I am very public as a person in general when it comes to sharing my life and friendships and family, but every time when it comes to relationship, I become very private. That being said,
Why is that? Is there like shame involved in there?
No, it's like personal insecurity. That's something I need to
or
work
just
on.
Privacy.
Just
You're
privacy.
allowed to be private.
Yeah. You don't have to announce that you're in love all the time. That's annoying. But I realized that I need to be more generous in meeting people, or else you won't meet anyone.
Yes, you have to put yourself out there. It's funny, there's like statistics about, I think it was like all these, and this is a very like hetero sort of point of view, by the way. So all these women have these criteria that men must be 6 feet or above. But it turns out something like it's only 20% of the population or something very minimal, but like 80% of the population is looking for that like 20%. So like something doesn't add up.
Do you think, is it true, or doesn't make sense for people who are in that has a more like their cultural background. When we trying to build that list is less about the literal appearance, but more like value.
Like experience based?
Do they understand our background? Are they willing to be more understanding or more open-minded towards one another? Like, it's more like from that angle. Do you think like because we change environments so relatively frequently, so I feel like when it comes to like third culture, we deprioritize the look, the job, the like materialistic or more like surface criterias.
Unless it's just for like a short-term fun.
Again, I'm introverted. I don't do short-term fun, but hoe away.
Thank you. I'm glad I got your permission.
Yeah, but also I think we become more realistic when it comes to like dating or like finding a potential partner, because again, one of the ingredients about being a third culture is we don't know how long we're gonna stay in one place.
Yeah.
So that reality check kind of hit sooner than other people.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's why when I do date, like living in different countries, I only look at things for short term, and I'm like, oh, if it does work out, then maybe. But my goal is, like, oh, we're probably gonna leave at some point, anyways.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like a factor in dating, I find.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't want to get into a relationship with someone that I knew was going to leave, intentionally, I suppose. But I think, yeah, if it does work out in the end, then you find a way.
So
to
you're
make it
more
work.
like we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Kind of. Yeah. Well, actually, no. If I know that someone's here for, like, just 1 year, then I probably wouldn't even think about them as an option to date. Yeah.
Just for fun.
Yeah, just for fun, maybe.
Again, hoe away. Hoe away. I guess, like, to me, I never got myself to a point that I have to really sit down and talk about it in that setting. However, like, I do realize myself when I meet someone and when we have that first talk, I straight off will just like dump all the kind of realistic circumstances that I'm in up front and let them know that third culture will always be part of me, and I'm not my mindset is not like I want to build a house or a family in that one place. So straight off, I'm already like, this is a temperature check. If you didn't get turned off by that, we can continue.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily I will like...
You just dump all your...
baggage.
Yeah.
Throw it at them.
Yeah. And they just... Oh,
they just take it.
Yes.
Or they run away.
Yeah. They run away, we don't want you anyways.
Yeah. But I did, speaking of, I have a story. Not my own story.
Yeah.
But because I feel like among third culture community, we do talk about like dating and how you encounter different, if you need to move around, if your partner is also third culture, like how do you deal with that? I think our friend, one time I did ask her, because she and her boyfriend both like third culture in Japan as well, right? And then I think at some point I asked her about, have you guys thought about like just staying in Japan for good, or you are thinking about going somewhere? And then she said that she actually, they didn't plan to stay in Japan just because they met each other and they're good for each other. It's always like up in the air, and then also like we'll cross the bridge when we get there.
Yeah.
So I think that's like a very common mentality to have for us.
Yeah.
Is we just so busy living in the moment. We don't really, there's like a reality check, but we also trying to just make the most out of that moment.
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like for the locals as well, they don't want to like fuck with people who are leaving a lot of times. So I think there's that challenge of, if you want to date locals, I don't know if that's something that they also think about.
Would you ever date a local? Like, with
A loco? Yes, I have many of them. Great at sex, but or maybe they say that about me, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know.
It's interesting because, okay, there's so many interesting dating stories dating in Japan, because I think there's this fetishization of foreigners here.
Not just here, everywhere.
Well, yeah, everywhere, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, as an Asian female, you get that a lot in other countries. I think here, there's like these gaijin hunters who all they want to do is date, you know, gaijins. They're like foreigners that are in Japan.
But usually it's like gaikokujin. Like gaijin
Gaikokujin.
has like a very kind of more negative intonation to it.
Yeah, although these days I think people are using gaijin pretty normally. But there is sometimes a negative.
Local.
No, true.
Yeah,
Not
native
us.
speakers, if they say gaijin, it's more negative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do remember there's some, like, really interesting dating differences. Like, for example, I was dating this Japanese guy who, you know, when you first date someone, you try and ask questions to get to know them. So I remember I met up with him to start the date or whatever, and I think this was like our third date or something. It's like, oh, hey, like, how was your day? And he's like, I don't know how to answer that question. Can you answer that question for me, and then I'll answer after you answer it to model it after your answer? I was just like, oh, okay, well, you know, like, today I did this, and this, and it was pretty fun, and I'm kind of tired, but I'm really excited to blah, blah. He's like, oh, you're literally just telling me about your day. And I was like, yes. You know, this is a way for me to get to know you, to see what you normally do. And he's like, well, yeah, in Japan, people don't really ask that question, or, you know, you're pretty private in general, so you don't really share all this information. And I'm like, well, then how do you get to know someone?
Yeah, but you're on a date. Isn't that like a private time? Doesn't it count
together?
Together.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay.
But then I was like, okay, then how do you get to know someone to gauge whether or not they're going to be a good mate for you?
Yeah.
And he said that they just sit with each other and you get by huinki, which is like aura or like vibe.
Atmosphere.
Yeah, atmosphere. You can just like sit together, and even like we're eating ramen together, and I was like chatting with him, and he's like, hey, we usually don't talk this much when we eat. I was like, oh my god. So that was the last time that I saw him.
Wow. Yeah. When I got here, I also had experience. I wouldn't say the person I dated, he's like fully Japanese. He did have experience being abroad, and then he went to school in the States, and then he came back. So his worldview is not as like domestic, but even that, I think when we go out, he also would have comments like, oh, I've never had a chance to talk something this deep or like this openly or more transparently.
Yeah.
But in my eyes, where like from my point of view, it's like it's completely normal.
Yeah.
It's not that deep. It's not that like naked to a point that someone needs to comment on it, because it's such a normal conversation.
Right.
Back in the States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also some cultures date for love, or like your personal preference that you like someone or something about someone, whereas some cultures date for practicality. I have this theory that like arranged marriages actually work well because there's like investment from both sides of the family. Obviously, in cases of like toxic or abusive relationship, it doesn't. But I think a lot of times why it works so well is because you've got this like social pressure to make it work. And so because it's not for love, as soon as you fall out of love, you're not going to be like, okay, see ya. But
so transactional is not necessarily a bad thing.
I think they see it more as like a business, right? It's like,
so transactional
exactly.
is not necessarily a bad thing.
Well, that's how I think you create longevity, I suppose, is if you're in it to win it and you're committed to make it work. So if there's harsh times, or if there's any sort of, you know, if you have one argument and you're like, oh, I don't love you anymore, or, you know, things like that.
Yeah, arranged marriage. That reminds me of when I was very little,
You had an arranged marriage?
No. But my mom had this.
Or an arranged marriage?
No, my mom hired this guy.
To have
he's
an arranged. Alright, I'll stop.
Shut up. But she hired this guy. He's Japanese.
Yeah.
And then because at that, when I was little, I already like, was pretty curious about Japanese culture. So
Japanese fever.
yeah, I had Japanese fever. But he would like spend some time with me just to talk about culture stuff, and then.
Did he have a podcast too?
No.
He should.
At that time, he was, I think, around like 28, so like around like time you have to get married and then have a family and stuff. And we did touch on arranged marriage. And then he provided a point of view that I never thought of it, even though at that time I was very young. I was like in middle school. What would I think? Things like that. Yeah, but I was like thinking about marriage and then thinking about like, you fantasize stuff when you're in middle school and high school. But the point of view that sticks with me is he said a good thing about arranged marriage is you just get to know that person from that point. So you start to get to know that person. So the honeymoon stage kind of lasts longer.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
interesting. But what if you don't like that?
Exactly. I'm like, that's like under the assumption that you like that person, right?
But I guess the whole thing about dating within your culture and having that arranged marriage is that you have that context of like family or like the family approved person who knows them. And so you've got the same culture, most likely like more or less the similar things and have the same sort of motivation.
Yeah. And I think like touch on the family matter is in Asia, a lot of Asian countries, it is very family oriented when it comes to marriage and dating or like having a life partner. Yeah. It's not just between the two people, it's between the two family.
Yeah. Like the moms will talk to other moms to be like, hey, my child wants to get married. Do you have a child? Like,
and then you do encounter incidents like this couples didn't work out because one side of family disagree, right? But or disapprove that partner. Versus like I feel like in the States it's again goes back to individualism. It's like they can argue that even my family didn't approve, I approve this person and that's good enough.
Yeah.
So I think that's like a elope. Yeah. And then that brings to my other stories that I want to tell.